Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you and to thank you for coming here. My name is Aziz Tufi Saliba. I am the current Dean for International Affairs of the Universidade Federal de Minas Gerais. And we are very glad to have such a distinguished delegation here. We understand that print was, for many, if not for all of you, the most relevant reason to come, and whereas we do not underestimate its importance, we believe that there is room for cooperation within and beyond print. We'll try to provide you some ideas about how we perceive, how we understand our cooperation strategy. Professor Davidson will talk a little bit about the building blocks of our internationalization strategy. Professor Mario, our Dean for Research, will talk about research at UFMG. And finally, I will present to you some concrete venues for cooperation. After, we'd like to hear from you, some ideas, some questions, whatever you feel like sharing with us. So, without further delay, I'd like to have Professor Davidson Lopes to have the floor. Professor Davidson Lopes is our Deputy Dean for International Affairs.
Thank you very much, Professor Saliba. It's a real pleasure to see many familiar faces again, many people whom I've met around the world. It's a pleasure to have you at UFMG on campus. I'd say this is possibly the most international lineup we have ever had during our history. At least, I mean, this high-level team of delegates is something historic. And I say it's not just lip service. I mean, it's for real. It's really nice to have so many important people, important representatives from literally every corner of the world. As Professor Saliba just mentioned, I have been tasked with this mission to explain what our internationalization strategy consists of, and I'll try to deliver it as quickly and as straightforwardly as I can. It's important to say, first and foremost, that, we have been revising our internationalization strategy over the last 8 months or so. We took over, as a matter of fact, in March, so earlier this year. And ever since then, we have been revising some of the pillars around which this presence of UFMG in the world was conceived, was thought of. So I would start with one very telling piece of information. When we came to office, we just found out that UFMG had around 430 partners around the world. So 430 friends around the world is simply unbearable. It's not, something we can manage from our office. And most of our agreements, and we have around 600 agreements into force at the moment, most of them don't produce anything. So we have partners everywhere in almost 60 countries around the world, but just a few, not even 10%, I'd say, they bring about consequences, effective consequences. So they don't produce anything, just paperwork. And when we came to office, when Aziz and I, when we took over, we decided to change it and to elaborate a new strategy. But firstly, we needed a consistent, solid diagnosis. So we have been working on this diagnosis, and I can tell you in all honesty that now, so only like 7-8 months after starting this work, which is very much, paving the way, laying the groundwork, but now we feel confident enough to deliver what our mission is and what our strategy is. So this is a spectacular opportunity for us to share with you. You are actually, you are the first ones we are delivering to. And we will have this opportunity to discuss, to explore the many facets, many aspects of our, say, international thought. So how we see ourselves and how we see our possibilities towards literally, the world. So this internationalization strategy is structured around 3 pillars. Pillar number 1, I will call it, and it's a very, say, authorial label. It's qualified ecumenism. What is it? Well, qualified ecumenism basically means that we are open to collaboration with everyone, everywhere in the world, but just with the most qualified ones. So it means we want to explore the possibilities that plurality, that diversity, that they make possible, but we don't want to cooperate with, anyone who is willing to. We must firstly identify some zones of convergence, some common ground for cooperation, and draw on it and build upon it so that we can deepen ongoing collaborations. And of course, this event is also destined to some prospective work, so we can identify some avenues for collaboration, for future collaboration, and then invest in it. But for that, we believe that it's necessary to work on some downsizing. So instead of having 430 partners around the world, we should better have like 30 or 40 friends. 40 good friends with whom we can cooperate on a multi-dimensional basis, with whom we can have mobility programs, research efforts, which will lead eventually to co-authorship. We must cover also cooperation at the undergraduate level, at the graduate level, reciprocal branding, and of course, our international offices should be connected, and we should be all the time thinking of new possibilities. In a way that I believe this occasion represents for us the birth of an informal network, which is based in Brazil at UFMG, but which aims to spread its tentacles across the whole planet. That's the idea. And literally, I believe that so far, we have been successful in attracting people from Africa, Asia, Oceania, Europe, North America, and Latin America. So this is great for us. This means UFMG is truly going global. So this is a landmark and should be seen like that. So again, qualified universalism. We want to be everywhere, but we want to have just the most valuable partners with us. Just those interested in having cooperation on a variety of fields, and in ranging from the life sciences to the humanities, covering just about every field, because we are comprehensive, we are research-led, and we should explore the possibilities that fall within these characteristics. So number two, building block number two, so to speak, is our strong regional platform. We are a Latin American higher education institution, and which means we should be very attentive to the possibilities that, and of course, the obstacles that lie ahead. But we believe that there is so much potential in this region, in Latin America, which after all, when we speak of Latin America, we are speaking of 650 million people. So human resources abound in this part of the world, but almost inevitably, our best and brightest, our best brains will flee Latin America towards the Northern Hemisphere. That shouldn't be like this. We believe Brazil should take responsibility for this fate to some degree, because over time we haven't played the leadership role we were expected to play. And I'm referring to foreign policy, to foreign educational policy. So Brazil should be spearheading the process of educational transformation. But just you know that BRINT is a brand new scheme. For the first time in Brazil's history, for the first time ever, we have a grant and a funding scheme dedicated to the internationalization of higher education. So in 500 years of Brazil's history, this is the first time. And this is a very convenient bait, if I may, a very convenient excuse, the BRINT scheme, for us to engage in other possibilities of international cooperation. There's more to international cooperation than BRINT in itself. And just referring back to Professor Saliba's words, whereas it might have been the reason why you came all the way from your home countries to Brazil, I believe it's just like the beginning. It's just the beginning. So we should think of other possibilities, and Aziz will be keen to deliver some other concrete venues for collaboration in a few minutes. But again, Latin America matters. And we believe we should serve as like a reference higher education institution in Latin America. We are ranked 9th by Times Higher Education. We don't think it's good enough. It doesn't really represent the potentials and the whole range of capabilities of UFMG. But one of the reasons why we haven't yet been placed on the radar screen of internationalization and rankings is that we have failed over time to make ourselves noticed. But that was then. Now it's different, or at least we like to believe in it. That this imprint seminar is again is the touchstone, is the beginning of a whole new story. And I mean, to finish, to conclude my quick presentation about our internationalization strategy, building block number 3 is UFMG's public mission. And that makes us different from, I'd say, 95% of all Latin American higher education institutions. Most of Latin American higher education institutions are teaching-led, so they are dedicated to teaching, not to research. Most of them are privately funded, unlike UFMG. And just a few are as comprehensive as we are. So we are not really concerned, or not as much as one can see around. We're not really truly concerned with like the market dynamics, although we have very good relationships with industry. But our priority number 1 is to serve the community. And that is easy to tell. I mean, if you look at our 2 hospitals, we have a vet hospital. We provide judicial assistance to those who cannot pay for their expenses, and so on and so forth. So we take it very seriously, this public mission of UFMG. And even by force of our constitution, I mean, we invest in community outreach programs. We are bound to do it. And we will keep doing it because we believe in it. We believe this is exactly the bulk of our legitimacy. It comes from our public mission. So we must insist on it, and we have to keep delivering this kind of output. We must be at the service of the Brazilian and Mineiro, the community from Minas Gerais and Belo Horizonte. So altogether, there's 3 building blocks. The qualified universalism, plus a Latin American platform, being a Latin American platform, plus UFMG's public mission, they all add up to a vision. So this is our vision for internationalization. Everything that we do from now on will be guided by these yardsticks. This is how we are erecting our internationalization strategy in a nutshell. And we can have, I mean, this conversation will go on, and we can have some elucidation about it during our Q&A. But to make a long story short, these are the 3 pillars around which we are structuring our presence in the world. That's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, Professor Mário Campos, our Dean for Research, will deliver a presentation on research at UFMG.
Okay. So I rather stand to talk, so it's very hard for me to even to teach sitting, so it's very difficult. So, first of all, thank you very much for coming here. It's really a great pleasure for all of us to welcome you. And we do hope that you feel welcomed and that you enjoy your stay here, okay? I believe for most of you, this is the first time in Brazil? No? First time in Minas? First time in Belo? Oh, okay. All right, so there's some first times. Well, my idea here is just go through some, as they gave me the title, facts and figures, right? Oh, I figure what that may mean, so I'm not really sure. Okay, there's some facts and figures. And I'm going to go through some numbers just to give some kind of a bird's eye view of some of the research that we do here at Universidade Federal de Minas Gerais. Okay, my name is Mario. So there's so many titles for this, vice provost, vice chancellor, I don't know. It's just some office, right, that we try to do some work. Okay, some facts. Somehow, there's this saying Belo Horizonte, the city. The city has been known, even in the past, as one of the nice cities to live because of the air. It used to be like this. We're surrounded by small, I would say mountains, right? But after I met some friends from Switzerland, they asked me, where are the mountains? So some hills we have around. And because of that, somehow people say that we are very much introvert. So we do not expose ourselves that much, right? We tend to be shy, in a sense, right? So this overhead slide is not very shy, okay? But we have to point out some key points here. So these basically are going to be the main facts that I'll try to bring. As you may, I believe most of you were in our president's, Professor Sandra presentation. Some of that material will be here as well. But one of the key things here as far as Brazil is concerned, and even if you consider Latin America, that's also true, but we stand among the top 5 universities in Brazil, and it has been like this for a long time. So I'm not going to discuss rankings here, but there are several ways to actually measure it. The metrics are not very easy to establish, right? Especially when you compare. Well, that may sound like the losers type of discourse, right? But that's not really the case. And we can talk about it some more. But what happens is that if you check one of the ways that they established some comparisons in Brazil, you're going to see that UFMG stands really very close, and I'm going to show this to you, very close to all the top 5 universities here. Okay. Okay, sorry. So it is really universal. The university encompasses numerous research areas, right, and areas of knowledge. We do have a very strong undergraduate program, undergraduate programs, numerous areas as well. And they're all very, they're very highly ranked according to the Ministry of Education. I don't know how much you know about this, but there's an exam after the student graduates. So they try to measure the quality of the institution by the output of their students. So, and somehow in these national exams, UFMG has been ranking very high. We have outstanding graduate programs, and again, that's measured by CAPES, right? I think most of you know about CAPES, which is the agency of the Ministry of Education. That's related to the higher level education. And the programs are ranked between actually 3 and to 7, 7 being the highest one. And if you look overall at the programs in UFMG, they stand between 5 and 7 with a large number of 6 and 7, okay? We also have very solid research output. I'm going to try to show some of this in the upcoming slides. You also have very dynamic collaboration with the industry. Here's, I think, important to point out some important points. If you consider multinational companies, a lot of the research happens in the headquarters. It's not very often that they let the main research go outside that area, right? So this is one of the things that we have to struggle. But we do have, besides that, and I'm going to show you, very intense collaborations with multinational companies and national companies, and very prolific ones. And I know. We are leader in the country in terms of patent applications and technology transfers. This is controversial, right? Because actually paying for patents is very expensive and it's very costly for us. So we are currently considering the direction we should go about this. Recently in Brazil, it has been approved a law. This law is concerned with innovation. And being a public university, we do have a lot of constraints. we're very much tied up with a lot of legal agenda, legal, you name it, a lot of red tape. And one of the things that were very difficult in the past was to establish closer collaboration with society, because, for instance, if you want to use a lab here, or if you want to rent a lab for a company to use, it was impossible. Second, if a professor and his or her students, they come up with a very nice idea, and of course they will be the best candidates to move that thing as far as the product is concerned. That was impossible. So all the things were fixed. And we do expect that with this law, this new innovation law, there will be a lot of a very much expected increase in this collaboration, which most likely will bring forth a lot of opportunities for not only new products, and new ideas going to the market. Okay, some figures now. You saw this at the first presentation. And this is the rank that is performed by this Folha de São Paulo. And they, of course, as any other rank, they have their parameters, right? But according to this rank, you see UFMG is this red line here. We stand pretty much between, the lowest was the 4th position, right? And the most recent one, we went back to 3rd position, right? So if you look at this graph, you see pretty much throughout the years, we've been in the top 5 position in the country, right? Now, most important is that if you rank just by numbers, right? But let's see some of the actual parameters here. If you look at the final score, the topmost one is 97.52, whatever this 0.52 may mean, I have no idea. This precision just amazes me. Right? I just come in awe, what's this? But anyhow, the topmost one is 97.52, and the lowest one is 95.58, so like two percentile points, right? So that's very, very little. Now the point is, what is actually being measured here, right? So it's different than some of the rankings, like QS and THE and so forth. They have different ways, different parameters in how they actually collect it, right? But there's some interesting points here. If you check here, for instance, you see that UFMG stands, as far as teaching is concerned, in the top. But if you look at the other parameters, we're not very much far away from other universities. So we're very close, right? And this is going to be clear as we move on. Very briefly, I'll try to give you a faculty profile. Oops, sorry. So this is divided into main areas, right? Exact sciences and technologies in blue, arts and humanities, and life sciences, right? So this is from 1989 through 2018. You see there's some discontinuities in the graph, right? And if you get the lump sum of these 3 main areas, you're going to see about here, there was a major change for the federal universities in the country, because there was a program that had as a goal to basically double the number of vacancies, right, of positions for undergrad students mostly. And it happened to us. So as usual, people do, right? So here's a bag of money. So if you want to get this bag of money, you should double the entries to your undergrad programs or graduate programs. And it happened to be that about that time, we doubled the number of our undergrads, right? As you may imagine, with a few signatures, you can actually double it. It's not difficult. But infrastructure does not come along with it. There's a big lag between these 2 actions, right? First, hiring new faculty. There was a big challenge. It happened all over Brazil. So if you have a big hiring spree, if that happens in a very short period of time, it's very hard for you to get the best candidates. So what happened all over Brazil is that somehow we got some endogenicity. We became a little bit endogenous. Meaning what? Meaning that many of our faculty, actually, they were graduates from UFMG, from UFMG, from all over the place, okay? Now, on top of that, you have that in the past 10 years, we hired about 45% of our faculty today. More than that. Of course, you hear about what's going on as economic and all these changes in Brazil recently, right? And there is a possibility of numerous faculty actually getting retired. So you see a scenario here, right? It's not that doom. Don't be concerned. But this points out to a very important issue. If you consider the older generation, right, a lot of those faculty, they actually got their PhDs abroad, many of them. And somehow this was not the case afterwards. I don't know if there's maybe several reasons for that. But it happens to be that currently, if you check the degree, if I could say, so of internationalization, and whatever we may measure it, you see that it's lower in a sense. We do have some good numbers here, but the point is we need to increase that, and I'm going to show you why, okay? Did you, I always remember an old professor at the University of Pennsylvania. He's still there, Max Mintz. And he used to say, "Are you with me? Are you with me?" So far? Okay, you're not sleeping already, right? Okay. So if you check then the graduate profile of our faculty, and this is by areas, you know, the resolution is not that great, but you're going to see that if you look on the left here, right, you see that in general the areas, right, and these bars actually show percentage of international full PhDs abroad, right? Of course, you see it grows from here, it decreases from the base to the top, right? You're going to see that this mostly happened in computer science, economics, and so forth and so on. And in a smaller percentage in the clinical health, clinical, professional health, some of the law, right? Sorry, Professor, what's this? Education, and so forth. Did you get the picture? Okay. So somehow this is the graduate, the faculty graduate profile. Where do they obtain their PhDs from? Okay. In orange, or this color here, whatever it may be, is the sandwich program. So after a while, of course, as the Brazilian academic population increased, of course, also increased the capacity for us to train our new students. So it's costly, of course, as you may know, to have a full PhD abroad. And then the sandwich PhD programs became very common, became very popular, okay? So that's how you see it here. In blue, you see PhDs obtained in the country, in Brazil, right? And in orange here, those obtained at UFMG. I think this shows very clearly the scenario. And I think I believe you can see that the great need that, and that's what we're trying to push for, is that we increase, for those, especially here, opportunities to be more international, okay? Now, this is the faculty with experience, some experience in international as postdocs or visiting scholars. Somehow, we call anything that happens after the PhD as a postdoc, okay? Even though you've been a professor for 10 years here, if you go abroad, they call it a postdoc. And somehow it became a title, right? Like a PhD. Postdoc is a title. Can you imagine that? So it's crazy. Now, this faculty per research area, there's something that went far away there. So how are the faculty distributed among the three main areas, right? Main research areas. So in blue is exact sciences, arts and humanities, and life sciences. Oops. And here you see the faculty international experience as far as PhD and postdocs are concerned. In gray here you see the postdocs, right? Visiting scholars. And again, the country. The countries are here below, in the x-axis, right? There is very clearly, no? Here the largest amount is in the US, right? We do have, that's historical, quite a few from France, right? Collaboration, even from previous collaborations, or United Kingdom, and so forth and so on, okay? Let's get some numbers in research. I start with funding. It's very clear to see this graph, right? See that? Downhill. And if you check roughly the date, this is 2017, this is 2014. In blue here is government money. In orange here, basically what we get from industry or some type of collaboration with private sector, okay? Proportionally speaking, that's not very different from what you see abroad. It's not very different. But clearly, what we want to do is to increase the orange part, right? Increase as much as possible, but not increase the blue part at all. We have to increase the orange part. And this is a big challenge. As you can see, this is an immediate result of what happened to our economy, okay? Roughly speaking, GDP of Brazil is 1.6 trillion reais, okay? And as far as investment in science and technology, currently it's about 1.2% of GDP, okay? That's very little. It's interesting that in the previous election, just happened, one of the candidates said, no, we want to have 3% of the GDP for science technology. So, okay, we'll do better than the United States. Let's do it. But honestly speaking, right, if we aim at reaching 2%, that would be amazing, right? That would be amazing. And what the question is, if you see this downhill here, the first question I think you ask is, where did the money go? Right? Do you have any idea? No, I'm not talking about corruption, please. Some money went there, but of course we're talking about much more than that. One of the things in Brazil that's very difficult is the interest spread. Is the amount, is the percentage between what you take when you get a loan, right? Right? When you ask for a loan. So this spread in Brazil is awfully high. So the financial system, this is not, please understand me, this is not an ideological or political critique, right? But this is just an observation of what's going on. So a lot of this surplus went to the financing system, right? That's really true. Second point, which I think is more important. If you consider this that we want to increase here, this has to come from industry. This has to come from industry in general. And the point is, if you look even worldwide, somehow that has decreased, but even more so in Brazil. So if you look at the graphs, I didn't bring them here, but if you check any site, you're going to see that the declination or the decrease in investments in industry was tremendous. So somehow you're going to see a graph that's similar to this, right? As far as attendance is concerned. So these two issues, I'm not saying I'm not an economist, but somehow explains partly where did the money go, right? Now, there are some expectations that with this new law that I just mentioned to you, the innovation law, and some other measures, there is a possibility that this can be reversed. But, as you know, this is a dynamic system with a very high inertia. Time constant is very, very large. It's just like the turning radius of a big ship. It takes a while. So we do hope that if these things get into place, these things, as far as financing is concerned, will get better. And there is already some sign of a small changes in the derivative here. So we'll see. Now, as far as publications are concerned, the fonts are very small here. And I myself have to get closer. Life sciences, engineering, technology, natural sciences, social science and management, and arts and humanities. This is in terms of numbers, right? Output, right? So in parentheses, very hard to see here, is the number of documents in the base of Web of Science. Sorry, this is Scopus, right? This is severe. Number of publications per area. Now you have number of citations per area. But these two graphs, they do not match, right? One thing, of course, is you want to have a good research output, but you want it to be of high quality, okay? And you're going to see where I'm driving at. If you check now the field-weighted citation impact, meaning that you check that we're talking about this database, right? One means that's the average, in this case, citation of the database, right? Excluding UFMG. And this is the field-weight citation impact of course, when you compare the several areas, right? We have to do this mapping, as you saw here. Even for the sprint, you have to do the mapping. Oh, sorry. Those who are in blue, they are 1 and above, meaning that they match the average of the database or are above that, right? Those in red, they are below. Of course, what do we want here? We want to push these red lines to the right. That's not easy, for several reasons, okay? Now, this graph, I remember when I showed this to our rector, right, Professor Sander. When you see this terrible derivative here, you basically tremble, right? So things going really downhill. It is, but not that much, okay? What this thing is saying here is that we should read in a better way. As some people say, consider the half of the cup that is full, not the half that is empty. So the half of the cup which is full, if you look at these numbers here, basically it says what? When you compare the citation impact overall, right, with only national co-authored documents, we are still above the average, okay? There was a nice increase here, but then there's a declination happen here, okay? But the key point here is, if you look at the blue line, this blue line shows all those documents that were co-authored with international co-authors. As you can see here, you have something like 3.5 times more citations, right? So this is true, period. Of course, we're not aiming at internationalization just to change this graph. What you want, first of all, is that our research, in the first place, be meaningful, good quality. With that, we can be sure that it will have a good citation number. And of course, if you are working shoulder to shoulder with your international colleagues, the chances are that this will happen for several reasons. So internationalization for us is very important. This is one of the reasons, okay? Now, this again shows internationalization as far as percentage of documents in the database that are that I just showed you. And you see here there's a trend line going down. Again, somehow the number or the percentage of documents co-authored with international co-authors, right, has been decreasing. And we need to push this really hard. This is going to be more evident. Oh, what happened here? Well, that's why I want to use my computer. I'll try to hand wave so you can understand this overhead here. If you look at this graph, what basically says is as follows. On the x-axis here, you have the number of documents with international collaboration, okay? On the y-axis, just imagine, okay, this hand wave. Sorry about that. I can assure to all of you that it works perfectly in my computer. On the y-axis, then, you have the number of citations, if I could say so, okay? So a point here, like you see UFMG, shows that we have this number of documents similar to Unicamp, a little bit larger, okay? Sorry, it shows the number of documents with international co-authorship, and on the y-axis shows the impact, if I could say so, of these documents. So if you look along this line here, you see somehow our impact is slightly higher than USP. USP is very large, right? But if you check the x-axis, somehow you see the percentage of papers, of documents there are with international collaboration is smaller, okay? I'll move on, hopefully. This is basically just a zoom in that graph. So this, we just changed the scale here. What is important to note? What's important to note is this. The distance between this point here and this point here. Let me see. This is what we want. This is currently the scenario. The distance between, if I could say so, the first ranked here, right? USP and UFRJ, this is Rio de Janeiro, and us, right? This gap here is what we want to narrow down. So what we actually want is actually to move UFMG diagonally here, okay? It doesn't happen overnight. We do need internationalization, good cooperations, good science, okay? I don't know what happened to my graphs. Is that computer there, I think? Too bad. Maybe I'll switch to my computer later on, then you can see the graphs. But what I want to show here, basically our president has shown to you. We have little spheres here showing where each one of the institutions that are present in this print, where they are. As for document numbers, of course, this is Z-scored and citation here. So you see there are spheres all over the place, right? And these spheres, they're basically graded, color graded, according to the main 4 pillars of our print. And if you look at this graph, just imagine you have several spheres here, right? And what we want actually is to move jointly, together, to move all these spheres into this direction, which means more papers, more documents with international collaboration with higher impact, okay? That's the direction. Oh, there you can see. Finally, I just want to very briefly mention to you about innovation industry partnerships, okay? This is a very small portion of what the university has, what I'm going to show next. One of the things that we are really working hard is to get, in a sustainable way, information. The university is very, very large. So we are about 3,000 faculty, right? And each faculty has its own, his or her own head, right? I know it doesn't happen in your place, but each one is their own king, his or her own king. A lot happens that we at the research office, we just hear about. So we just get somehow building up a system that will be able to gather this information. So this is going to be a very, very small snapshot, okay? So if you bear with me, these are some of the companies, national companies, as you can see, some international companies that we have had, and we still have successful partnerships. I'm just going to flip this very quickly, right? Some of the national companies like Vale is a mining company, right? This is telecommunications, this is an old one, Bosch, LG, and so forth. So, and of course with the giants, by Petrobras and Semig, which is an electric company, right? And this international or multinational, like, of course you know all of them. This one is a Brazilian one. And I just want to mention as one of the cases that happened, which is about this company called Aquan. This is a spin-off of faculty and professors, faculty and students from the computer science department. Way back, 1995, I believe, they had this project of building the Brazilian network. It exists about 4 years before. That's when we had the first research network called RNP. It started in 1992, actually. So in 1995, they started this company. So they'll have the Brazilian web. And they did a wonderful job. And because of what they have done, it caught the attention of both IBM and Google. And after some negotiations, actually, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, they came here, just across the street, and they bought that company. So Aquan was bought out by Google. I don't remember, it says 2005. And it became the single Google engineering facility in the Southern Hemisphere. And I believe there are only two or three in the world. And these guys are the only ones that are entitled to touch the search engine of Google. So this is the quality of the students that are graduated from here. And shows also that the university, UFMG, does not stand still. And basically, it has very strong liaisons with numerous industries, right? I could also mention some of the industries in the biotechnology. Belo Horizonte has been known of one of the main biotechnological centers in Brazil, mainly because of the work that happens at our biological institute. So, one example, most of you have heard of high blood pressure, right? The discovery of I do not know how to pronounce that in English because that's not my area. If any of you is the biological area, peptide. Thank you. Yeah, was basically developed right here, right? And all the medications today that are for blood pressure, they are based on this peptide. This is just one example. Second example, spleen, right? So if you are diabetic, right, you need to take insulin. So one of the companies that was spun off from here, from that institute, was called Biobras. And they were sold, or bought out by a Dutch company. And they were the first to actually synthesize the drug, I think they use some special technique, and they were established in the north part of this state. So these are just some examples. That's why I mentioned that UFMG not only has very solid research output, but we also have very strong and very prolific industrial liaison. Okay? So I think that's it. I hope I didn't bore you too much. So if you have any questions, you can ask me later. Thank you so much for your attention. Sorry about the slides.
Thank you, Professor Mario. Before talking about some concrete venues for cooperation, let me just make two brief notes. First one, I forgot to introduce some of my colleagues from UFMG who are here. First, Professor Aristóteles Góes Neto from our Institute of Biological Sciences. He's also the president of our Center for North American Studies. Professor Marcela Gomes, who works in our international office. She is responsible for mobility of students and faculty. Professor Lucas Lima from our School of Law. He's our contact point at the School of Law, so if you're interested in cooperating with our School of Law, would be a good idea to talk to him. And also, some of you may already have exchanged messages with Thiago Duarte, who also works in our international office and helps us reply to many partners around the world. Another note, another brief but very important note, is that there is coffee and cheese bread outside, the pão de queijo. So I know that with jet lag, coffee might, at least during the day, help. It sort of, I mean, later on you sort of pay because then you don't sleep. But you know, there's also cheese bread, which might give you some energy for the rest of the day. It's our signature cookie here, right? So as Professor Davidson Lopes mentioned, we have been in office for about 8 months, and we've been trying to change our, we've been implementing a change in our international strategy. We have over 430 partners, over 600 legal instruments signed with these different partners, but we're not focusing on more friends, we're now focusing on better friends. And I hope that some better friendships may come out of this meeting. By a better friendship, we mean a improved cooperation, cooperation in different fronts, right? We are very much interested, we are open to cooperate in many different ways. First of all is what we call qualified mobility of professors and researchers. Obviously, this falls within print, but also may also happen outside of the print scopus, as there are other sources of financing for mobility. So we are able to send professors abroad for a sabbatical, right? We are able to receive professors as well. They may engage into teaching and research here, and that is very much appreciated and falls within what we would label traditional cooperation. We obviously also have for undergraduates, a very strong program called Minas Mundi. It's a program for exchange student, and it's the largest undergraduate exchange student program in Brazil. If you would like to know more about that, then Professor Marcela Gomes is the person to talk to, as she is responsible for running that program. In that program, we do fund our poorest students so that they can spend a semester abroad. Again, in the traditional cooperation field, we have research and co-authorship of articles, as mentioned by Professor Mario Campos. We're very much interested in improving the number of articles co-authored by our professors and co-authored by professors from different foreign institutions. We know that that's a very likely way of strengthening the impact factor of those articles. Professor Mario has given me a number yesterday. I believe it increases the impact factor by
3 to 4.
3 to 4.
3 to 5.
The number of citations. Yes. In addition to that, we do have other possibilities, such as online seminars, right? It's obviously, we do have also presential seminars. Professors will be, from your institutions, will be very welcome to participate in conferences here. And we also hope to be able to send some of our professors to your institutions. But we can also take advantage of technology in order to have these online seminars. But we know that that has been done in different instances. It's not anything unusual. What we would propose that falls a little bit out of that are three things. First of all, we do have a summer school. We created a summer school, and we have to begin with a... Okay, Professor Davidson is reminding me that there's a brochure inside your bags. There's a yellow brochure, very bright brochure. You might use your Ray-Bans to read it, to read them. But this program is a summer school. I mean, this happens in July. We are asked by partners from New Zealand if we would be able to run it in January. If we do have a certain number of students who are interested in coming, over 20 students, obviously they do not have to come all from the same school, then we are able even to offer another session in January. For some of you, that may work better than July. It's a course on Brazilian studies. It's a 2-week course on Brazilian studies. We have classes on Brazilian history, Brazilian geography, Brazilian law, Brazilian politics, Brazilian culture, and so on. And it's all done in English, which I know helps for many of you, as Portuguese is not exactly the most spoken language worldwide. Additionally, we do use the summer school for helping diminish the imbalance that might exist when we do have an exchange agreement of undergraduate students. We understand that sometimes it might be difficult for partners to send students here for a semester. First of all, because for many students, Brazil is still a very exotic destination. Second, because of the language barrier. So this helps in 2 ways. One, it's a very short experience. So people are normally more relaxed about going abroad for 2 weeks than they are going abroad for a semester. And secondly, it's entirely done in English, so language is never a problem. Third, the second way that we are willing to cooperate is distance learning classes. How would this work? A class would be offered by a professor from institution, say X, in conjunction with a professor from UFMG. In one semester, both professors would offer a course targeted at our students here in Belo Horizonte. And in the second semester, both professors or two other professors would offer a course targeted at the foreign audience located in the university of the professor who offered the course jointly with us. We would have an agreement, and we could do a small or a number of classes could agree on the classes beforehand. So there is flexibility there in how we actually write the agreement, right, on what we actually or get down to. But the basic idea would be to allow two professors to spend one semester teaching together one seminar, exchanging ideas and interacting, and that might lead to further cooperation. In addition to that, we'll have what we call internationalization at home. We'll offer students here the opportunity to have a foreign professor, to have a course delivered in conjunction with a foreign professor, and then later we'll offer students at your universities the same opportunity of having a course delivered by a professor from our university. So that in some cases, I was talking to Professor Grant, in some cases, Bangladeshi female students, he was telling me, do have a difficult time, they are not allowed actually to travel abroad by themselves, right? This would help them have a international experience by taking the course at their university at home. Third way of cooperating are co-tutel. We envisage three levels, three different possibilities here. We are going to, for the reasons that I'll explain, we'll focus on the second one. But the first possibility of cooperating in that regard is to have two advisors for a same candidate. So let's imagine that Professor Mario is serving as my advisor. We can also have another professor from, say, the University of Pennsylvania, from which he is an alumni, also advising me. And in the end, I would benefit from having two advisors, discuss with them my work and so on. And obviously, they would be cooperating. And from that cooperation, that might come articles and other products. This obviously, for that, we obviously do not need any sort of agreements. This is done through the different graduate programs that we have, and it's done in a more, say, informal manner. I mean, it has to be approved by the respective graduate program, but it's not necessary that we have a formal instrument signed between our institutions in order to do so. Second possibility, and I'll come back to it in a second, are double degrees or co-tutels. And third, we have joint degrees. By joint degrees, we mean that the two universities come together and offer one course, right? So at the end, if the student is approved, he'll have a certificate with two badges from both institutions. Now, by co-tutel or by double degree, we mean the student actually fulfilling the requisites here and the requisites abroad, giving our partner, obviously, the same opportunity to send students, right? And if the students fulfill the requirements here and abroad and is approved by a bench of examinators from both institutions, he may get 2 degrees instead of one from UFMG and another from the partner institution. We understand that different countries have different regulations for PhD programs, so we like in this case, we are extremely flexible in the co-tutel agreement. But the idea here is, instead of doing it in the more traditional way of drafting one agreement per student, as it is normally done, we would like to propose a general agreement which would serve as the basis for all the following co-tutels. Additionally, the level of details that we may have in that agreement may vary substantially. We may, for example, put all the necessary requisites in that agreement. We may limit that agreement to only certain courses. We may say in that agreement at which point she may or may not go. We may also put the number of credits that he must take here and there. We can also discuss the length of stay and where, in which language, the final examination will take place. So those are some ideas of cooperating. As I told you, as stated here, we are very much interested in improving, in strengthening the cooperation that we have, right? In have better friends, not more friends. And I hope that we can take some of these ideas to improve the cooperation that exists between our universities. Thank you very much. Well, we'll now go for, we'd like to offer you the opportunity to speak or to ask questions as you see fit. So whoever is willing to share with us his or her views or to pose questions will be very welcome.
Okay, so I'll be careful then. So no comments about Brexit. It's all going to be fine. So I think firstly, I think on behalf of the group, many, many thanks for a fantastic presentation, rich opportunities. That's the good part. This is a bit of devil's advocacy. So if I survey the history of UK education system engagement with Colombia or Chile or Brazil, I see a landscape of dispersal. So lots of time invested, including Sem Fronteiras, and actually very, very small returns. How are you going to ensure that the follow-through gives us a sustainable long-term impact? That's the devil's advocate question.
Excellent. Wonderful question.
I'm going to call prosecutor question, not
Professor Mario, would you like to begin?
No, please go ahead. No, I can follow.
Well, I tried to pass the hard ball to Professor Mario, but well, first of all, I've always been a strong critic of Science Without Borders, Ciências Sem Fronteiras. I thought some of my colleagues thought it was at least a good marketing piece. I would argue that even if it was a good marketing piece, it was an extremely expensive one, as over 15 billion reais were spent on it. That's an awful amount of money, and we knew that someday the bill would arrive, and the bill has arrived, right? Print, and I have said that this many times, print, I think it's an improved version of Science Without Borders, right? The amount of money that is being spent here compared to Science Without Borders is not as great. It's 1.2 billion reais compared to 15 billion reais, not an awful lot of money. It has the potential of developing stronger partnerships, however, as it's better structured, right? The cooperation is done between universities. It's not simply sending undergraduate students abroad without any sort of later responsibility. But I believe that more important than putting all the eggs in one basket is to have a clear strategy of what you want to achieve with internationalization and how you are going to achieve it, and make sure that government programs, they are part of your strategy, not your entire strategy. Because governments change, right? We've had some very different governments in the last 30 years, from military dictatorship to the Labour Party, to the extreme right-wing candidate right now. I mean, those are very different governments. But one thing that's very important to state is that the university has survived over, it's fairly recent in Brazil, but it has survived under very different governments. It has actually thrived under very different governments. And if we are able to implement a certain strategy, as we've been doing here, and convincing the community that that is the best way to do, you with time, independently of what government gives you or takes from you, their cooperation will be sustainable.
How successful will be Brexit? No, just now I'm being the prosecutor here. So, no, you don't have to answer that. That's a hard question.
Any one of us
Yeah. So, oh, no, just to wake you up. Anyhow, I partially agree what has been said. One of the key problems with Science Without Borders, in my perspective, was that it lacked good planning. Okay, and the idea in itself is not bad, but without planning, the outcome may be not as much as we expect, right? But I disagree that if I could say so, the results are not in yet. Because somehow I believe what happened to many of these students in several degrees was very different. To some of them, the impact was tremendous. Some, but this happens if we believe this is a Gaussian distribution. No, I don't know if it is. It's a large number. But we may get some very good results out of it. Now, was it worthwhile in terms of cost-benefit? We'll see, right? But I agree. I remember very vividly when the idea, or the program came out, how it was implemented here. And UFMG, we do have some structure to do that. And what I believe lacked the most was a very strong tie and commitment from the institution abroad. Because many of them, most of them, did not know what actually was going on, right? And collaboration, this is me again, sorry. Collaboration does not happen by law. You understand what I say? If you come out with a law that you must collaborate does not happen. Collaboration does not happen that way, in my perspective. So I believe what is different now from my perspective. First, there has been more planning. Second, what I do hope, and that's my criticism about Brazil as far as science is concerned, we unfortunately do not have a long-term plan for science. That's my perspective, right? Okay, we are much younger than Great Britain. Okay, we are much younger than other countries. We're still learning. Science in Brazil, I would say, is about 50 years of age. So it's very young. So I believe it's part of growing up. It's part of maturity. We can do better because we can learn from other people's mistakes. But in this case specifically, what I do expect, I do hope, that the outcome will be much better because there has been more planning. The very fact that you are here for us is very encouraging because we can see that somehow you also believe in this planning, okay? So that, as much as I could answer. Then you can tell me later about Brexit.
Okay, let me just quickly react to this very provocative question brought up by our friend Colin Grant. First of all, and maybe it's just my political science background speaking now, but I'm afraid that what applies to the whole of Brazil doesn't apply to higher education in the same way, at least, because our higher education bureaucracy is growing more and more mature and consistent over time. And I would go as far as to affirm that Science Without Borders is kind of an outlier, and a bad outlier. I agree with Professor Saliba's interpretation to a large extent. It is a poorly tailored policy, which was very much looking for some worldwide recognition for like placing Brazil on the map, but the wrong way. So it consisted basically of dispatching 100,000 Brazilian students, undergrad students, throughout the world. But at the end of the day, it served actually as a convenient way for the middle and upper classes to send their kids to have beautiful European trips and to get to know a list of like 15 or 20 countries in a year. Well, there's one very curious fact about Science Without Borders, which Professor Campos sometimes calls borders without science. He's got good reasons for that. He's the one who is in charge of research and science, so he knows what he's speaking of. But Brazil has sent more students to Hungary, a country with which we hardly maintain cooperation at any level, more students to Hungary than to the sum of all Asian countries, Japan, China, South Korea, Taiwan included, India included. So it tells a little bit about how miscalibrated this program was from the beginning. It was flawed by design.
With all due respect,
I'm sorry, Professor.
I don't think you've answered the question. So I'm David Wilson from the University of Southampton. So Colin used to be... So with the greatest respect, you've answered a different question. You've identified what you shouldn't do. So the question is, what do you need to put in place for it to be sustainable? And I think the answer is really simple. Because if you analyse the institutions that have done this successfully, the key element of researchers or the programme directors meeting face-to-face, the two institutions, they like each other, they want to do business, they do research, they do exchange. And that's the solution to your graph of co-authorship. And I think they're the people that provide sustainability, that keep things progressing, and therefore I would make it easy for those people to meet. I would, they need some resource for that. and reward that behaviour. I don't mean salary, but in terms of reward in whether sabbaticals or things that you identify it, provide them with promotion, and that behaviour will be, people will identify that elsewhere in the institution and want to replicate it. So I think the answer is simple. I agree with you, not Science Without Borders. My own personal opinion about Science Without Borders, it was very expensive marketing. Someone looking into Brazil, it demonstrated Brazilian ambition, but I think you sent the wrong students. You don't send undergraduates. Only 20% were PhD students. I think that's where the focus should have been.
Very glad that you, with what you've just said, Professor, because I've been saying for years that we should, that we should not have focused on sending undergraduate students abroad. I mean, this was, in my view, the worst mistake we made in designing this program. Now it's quite evident that the program failed, but I think that with print, we have learned from past mistakes. I have to give CAPES that recognition. But obviously, I cannot disagree with the view that for cooperation to happen, professors have to talk. That's one of the things that's why we have come up with the ideas of having the co-tutels and the courses, undergraduate courses or graduate courses taught together using distance learning. Because unless you get two professors to talk a little bit and to hear, and then think about what the other one is saying, it's very difficult to have cooperation. Obviously, we're willing to send people abroad, we're willing to receive people, but we know that there are limits to that. So we also want to take advantage of online technology in order to improve it. David, and then...
Okay, if I could then move on from what we're planning to do and the investment in the mobility and these various other things, have you given some thought at this early stage about how you're going to measure this, how you're going to measure how this has been successful, and perhaps that money put in a certain direction is being less successful than others? And I know that this is a challenge because it takes time. Clearly, we already have researchers talking to each other, some who have already got collaborations going well before this meeting, but it takes time for publications to come through. I've seen that with some of our other partnerships at Glasgow, where we've been looking at I've been challenged. We have a scheme that funds mobility between certain partners, and the challenge to me is, well, how is this doing? And you talk to people, you can use the citation indices and the publication databases to find joint publications, but some things are just not able to be found that way. There will be publications which may not be jointly authored but have been helped by mobility. There will be grant applications that have been made because they can only be made to FAPAMIG or to EPSRC. There isn't a joint funding opportunity available, but the application has depended crucially on the input from the other partner. And the only way that I've found so far to do that is just go out and ask people. And it's a big job to try and do that. So I think it's important as you make your investments, and we also collaborate with that, to think about systematic ways in which we can keep up to date with how this is going.
Yeah, I think that I agree 100% with that. The point is, what has been discussed about this, quote, an easier way to measure, in a sense, and of course there's a lag, as you said, because there's a lag between when the collaboration started and when you do have some research output, right? The easiest way to measure it, of course, is going to some of these databases, right, and see what is there, right? But I really don't know, and if you know, I'll be really willing to hear. What we have thought about, of course, is using those tools that are available. But to measure the real impact, that's you observe that my position concerning Science Without Borders is slightly different, right? Maybe because I'm older, I don't know. But I think the story has not ended yet. So we don't know what actually happened, right? We know some objective way what happened maybe did not work according to some perspective, but there's much more that goes on. So when you're talking about people interacting, there's a lot more than just numbers in citation index and stuff like that. So that's why I said collaboration does not happen because you have a program like Print. You know what I mean? I don't know if I make myself clear. In order for collaboration to happen, I agree with Professor Aziz, you need researchers to talk to each other. But that's just part of the problem, in my perspective. If you allow me, one of the key issues, the real glue, if I could say so, are the students, right? If we make them move, of course, in terms of investment, we may think what would be the highest return. We may think of PhDs, right? Maybe postdocs and stuff. That's true. So we have to actually manage well the resources in terms of trying to obtain the highest return. The metric, we still have to find out the best metric, which dimension actually to measure. Some of them I think is very difficult. So I would love to hear your perspective, your suggestions of other metrics that we can use to actually measure that.
Of a PhD student to one of our partners or received one from them. We also have a small fund called our International Partnership Development Fund, which can then be used as a follow-on. For example, to get together a group of researchers to have a workshop for a few days at either ourselves or the partner. But then things sort of fall flat. People then say, well, what can we do next? And what we're learning is we've had a number of discussions back home about this. One of our partners, the University of Sydney, had been participating in schemes that we'd initiated. They've since come back and said, actually, we're not going to do that now. We want to do things in a different way. And they have a mechanism which is almost, well, we've got together, we've made some connections, how do we build on this? So they're looking at focusing their money now in bigger chunks in a small number of areas. So they're now moving towards a system where it's a joint application from a principal investigator at Sydney, one at Glasgow. They're also doing this with other partners. And I think our aim is to make 5 awards of, I can't remember, something like 40,000 Australian dollars for a group. So it's it's moving on from just one student or one professor going in one direction or another to we actually have a really good idea for a joint project. We've got buy-in at both ends. We're involving 2 PIs. We've got some students perhaps involved as well. We promise almost that there will be publications and then research grant applications from this. So I think this may be a little bit down the line, but I think it would be good to be thinking about once we've developed a lot of these initial collaborations from the connections that we've made and the investments from Print, what could you maybe be doing? Maybe this could be part of, in 4 years' time, when you next have an opportunity to apply to Print round 3 or whatever it is, that you may have a different perspective. But I think if you could be thinking in parallel with these developments, that could be a good idea.
Thank you very much, Professor Fern. Just before our colleague, our colleague intervention, one brief reaction here is that I believe that on one hand, the number of publications, co-author publications, is perhaps one of the best measures that we have, but I do agree that it takes time, so I would think of, and we normally do it at the international office, we check how mobility is going, how many of our professors, students are going abroad, how many people are coming to FMG. I mean, I think that's one important measure of internationalization. The number of international seminars in which our professors are participating, and in the number of seminars here at UFMG in which we have foreign professors from university partners. The number of courses that will be offered, online courses that will be offered jointly with university partners. But additionally, I think that one of the advantages of selecting, as we plan to do, a limited number of partners, not 430, but 40 or 30, right, is that you can follow very closely what is going on, as I know that you do with Glasgow. You know all the cooperation that is going on, who is coming, who is going, and you can take the pulse at times and see if things are improving or getting worse. So it's I think it's one of the advantages of having fewer but better friends. So thank you.
I'm Michael Vorländer from RWTH Aachen University in Germany. And we have excellent experience with several research and education exchanges with Brazil, actually with several universities. UFMG is one of them. And I support very much what was said before by previous colleagues asked about, also concerning funding opportunities of bilateral funding cooperation agreements between, in our case, DFG or DRD and CAPES and SEMPICE. This runs very well. This is not the threat I could imagine. This is, we can find money, we can find good people. We can find particularly good people coming to Germany from Brazil. The threat, in my point of view, is to send people to Brazil, and the main reason is language. I didn't hear anything about language, and if you talk about graduate exchange students and PhD level students, double degree programs, co-cutel programs, and some of them have to pass courses here in Brazil which are taught only in Portuguese. This is a real threat. You would find people who are willing to come to Brazil, which have family background or some reason for going to Brazil, but you might not find the best people in the scientific point of view, which you like to get for having the best impact in publications and so on. So I like to know if there is some measure on your side for gaining more courses in English language on graduate level.
Well, thank you very much for that excellent question. We've had, about 2 years ago, a debate over that with our predecessor. There was a strong, it was difficult to convince people that we should work on improving the number of courses in English at the university. After beginning our term, one of the first measures that we did was to verify the number of courses, undergraduate and graduate courses, that we had in English. And we found out that it was much less than certainly much less than we wished, and even less than we had expected. So we do have, print in a way has benefited, has incentives for giving courses in English. One of the commitments that we have taken under print is to offer more graduate courses in English. That's number one. Number two, we have created a minor here at the university in international studies. We call it international studies. This minor is what we call formação transversal. That's a transversal course, so you can have professors from different courses. Courses they need this internationally oriented focus, right? But all the courses must be offered in either English or Spanish. They cannot be offered in Portuguese. And many professors have already joined us in that initiative. The idea of online courses is also a way of improving the number of courses in English, right? We believe it's another, it's something else that will help improve the number of courses in English. And finally, I'm very proud to say that Professor Davis and I proposed also 2 years ago the summer school. And one of the objectives that we had with the summer school was to give foreign students a chance of coming here and taking a course entirely in English. So I can think of these initiatives. I share the same concern that you have, and we will be working very hard. We have been talking also to the British Council in order to, because sometimes you speak English perfectly, but delivering a course in English might be a challenge for some of our professors, right? So there will also be a training for some of our professors who want to, of course, on how to offer courses in a foreign language offered by the British Council. So those are some of the initiatives off the top of my mind that I can think of. I don't know if Professor...
Just to tell you that Brazil belongs to that proud set of countries where not even 10% of the population, the respective population, speaks some English, some decent, proficient English. There are not too many countries with the same profile in the world, maybe some 30 or 40 countries out of 200. So it's a difficult starting point. I mean, we have to... Actually, we come across a lot of difficulties in going global. This is not an easy process for Brazil, for Brazilians. You know, we are all surrounded by Spanish-speaking countries. Well, there's Guyana in the north. It's the one and only English-speaking country in South America. But still, we are struggling with it, and we aim to come up with practical operational solutions. For instance, Professor Saliba is heading to Brasilia in the coming week, and we are already holding conversations with the U.S. Embassy in order to make UFMG a reference place for language learning for the sake of internationalization. We're also having conversations for some while with the British Council, with Canada Languages. So, yes, we have it in mind, and we will keep your nice intervention, we will keep it in mind, because we believe this is one of our main priorities for 2019, 2020, and for the years to come. I mean, this is really important, something we have to cope with urgently.
I forgot about my trip to Brasilia next week. I thank Professor Davison for reminding me of that. But he also forgot, we both forgot about something else, which we are very proud of. We also worked very hard for that. Only 2 universities in Brazil, until 1 year ago, only 1 university in Brazil had a Fulbright chair. That was the University of São Paulo. Now we are the 2nd university in Brazil to have a Fulbright chair. We have talked to Hanban from the Chinese government. Will be the first university in Latin America to have a chair, a Hanban chair. That is a chair partially funded by us and partially funded by the Chinese government in order to have professors from China, but they will be obviously delivering the courses in English, the number of Mandarin speakers here at the university. Although we've had about 600 students, but it's still fairly small when compared to English. So there are also these initiatives which we are very proud of and would like to share with you.
Very quickly. I think that's a very important issue. Language is really indeed, it's indeed a very strong issue. Just a little bit of our experience across the street. This situation might be a catch-22 in a sense. If you do not have any foreign student in your classroom, why are you going to teach that in English, right? Okay, that's one point. Now, I believe that as you saw, we have many faculty. They got their PhD abroad, and many of them in English-speaking countries, okay? So we do have a large number of professors that should be able to teach in English, okay? Now, we had some experience with that in the computer science department in two ways. We had some programs with NSF PIRE, where you have some students, North American students, and the classes where they attend, some of them rather not have it in English, believe it or not. They want to have it in Portuguese. But those who want to have it in English, we had no problem with that, okay? But one thing that may foster this initiative is when you have a professor from abroad coming here and teaching a course in English, right? So the two things may happen. So this part, I think, we may be able to handle. And this, again, is an issue of getting matured about it. But another concern I talked to Professor Sandra about, which is more delicate, is the staff. How many of our staff actually speak English to give support to those students, okay? And I was very glad to hear from her. There is a program. So I'm going to let them talk about it, which is really very, very important. In other words, to train our staff, which normally do not speak a second language, to be able to speak English, to actually assist those who come from abroad. So I'll let Professor Saliba explain that.
I have, as you can see, we've been very active in the last 8 months, and sometimes we forget of some of the things we have began, but Professor Marcel also deserves some credit for that. We began a program. We do have courses which are offered by and large to students of different languages, especially English, Spanish, French, Italian, German. But we were very concerned, we share the same concern with Professor Mario, and we decided to begin a course targeted at our staff. So people who, first of all, people who work in the international office, and then people who would have any sort of encounter with foreign students, so that they could speak English, give basic information, and so on, right? And obviously, there will be, we'll provide them further training for free if they want to. So, I don't know if there are further, yes.
Oh, may I come back on the way you evaluate the success of this kind of program? Because I think I wouldn't like to be provocative,
Professor,
but I think... Oh,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we cannot see your name from here.
Oh, yes, so sorry. I am Yves Leroy. I'm from France. Maybe I'm the only one here who is not a professor. I'm a doctor. I work for a National Institute of Research in Agriculture, the equivalent of Embrapa in Brazil. So from my point of view, it's very important to have success in terms of numbers of papers and impact of papers and so on, impact of science. But in INRA, we used to say we make science an impact. So science is to produce knowledge, to have a good impact, academic level, and impact is for how useful is our research for society, and including the industry, of course. And from my point of view, I'm very proud to say that half of the PhD degrees that goes out of my lab have a job even before they have defended in the industry. So employability of people who have been brought abroad by you should be a criterion to evaluate the success of this internationalization. No? What do you think about that?
Sorry, just want to make sure I understood the question. You're suggesting that one of the metrics that we can use would be basically the number of graduates, PhD graduates, that actually go to industry, or something like that?
Or those that easily find a job, or a permanent position or a job afterwards, within the 5 years following their PhD, for example.
That's a tough one, because there's so many, as far as I can see, if you consider the economic situation in Brazil, where we have basically 12 million people unemployed, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to remove the bias that will be in that data. You know what I mean? They did not get a job because of what? Because of unemployment rate? Because of what? So, but you touched a very, very important point. I didn't show that slide here. But if you look at where are the PhDs or the graduate students in Brazil, you're going to see the majority of them, in terms of jobs, they're going to academia. If you check Korea, for instance, like 70% of them actually in industry. So the point is, why our industry is not hiring PhDs? That's a question that we have. Part of it we may know why, but part of it we don't know. Actually, that's one of my frustrations, personal. I'd like to see more and more of the students, please understand me, not thinking about being a professor, okay, but actually going to industry. But somehow, that's my limited view, my personal limited view. I don't really see, at present, a feasible way to make this happen in Brazil yet, because there's a major bias, if I could say, in this data that is imposed by the economic situation. Second, as I mentioned to you before, many of the, for instance, the computer industry, information science industry, a lot of it happens outside, abroad. Many of our students, actually, they are hired abroad. The computer science students, right, their market is Silicon Valley. So many of them, really many of them actually went abroad. They didn't stay here. Okay. So this is something that is a little bit more complicated. That's my limitation of my perception. Okay, but that's an extremely good point.
I have also another comment on the time frame to evaluate the success of this story. I also collaborate a lot with China, and China have this bamboo root theory. So when you put a root of bamboo in the ground, you can wait for years and years before you see the first bamboo to grow up. But once there is one that grew up, you have a forest of bamboo. So just put the seeds and don't be in a rush to evaluate your program.
Let me just react to this lovely comment. Because, yeah, of course, I tend to agree with you in regard to the patience and the need to wait for the harvest. Let me just tell you something. For the first time in our history, we were ranked this year by QS employability ranking. There's something related to employability by QS, right? It was the first time in our history. And we ranked like 400, 350, something like this. But when it comes to alumni, this is remarkable. We were top 100 in the world, which means that our students or our community, they are taking up those Forbes 500 companies. They are taking up leadership positions on these companies, which is impressive. I mean, I never thought we were that good in delivering students of that quality. But when it comes to reputation, then we do bad. I mean, we don't reach good scores. So there's this feeling among us that we need to find better ways to make ourselves known around the world. So that matters. We're thinking of ways, and we will be coming up with, tentative solutions in the coming years. But we have it, on the radar screen. We have already identified this problem, and we will be thinking of ways to deal with it.
Hello, I'm Maureen Ahrensberger from Switzerland, and I just would like to pick up on a couple of things that have been said. One, the focus on PhDs and PhDs not going into industry, and the question about focusing on master students for mobility. Is it possible to write a master's thesis in English?
Yes, it happens.
In most of the faculties?
Yes.
Okay, because that's certainly something you could build on. It's the master students who are probably going into industry. You've just said that the PhD students don't go into industry, and that's a way of monitoring the mobility as well. So master students who've spent some time abroad, are they more likely to pick up on these positions?
Well, I actually have the same comment on going to industry for PhD students. All of my PhD students, Paul Proost from Leuven, from Belgium, all my PhD students went out of academia at the moment. And one of the major issues is always languages. It's not only the technical knowledge, the scientific knowledge, but often one of the crucial criteria in industry is language, certainly for multinational companies. So I think also in that respect, English is a major issue. I had a very specific question on print related to double degrees. For us, if we start a double degree at the start of the PhD contract, we have to make a contract for 4 years. Now, in print, CAPES funds, you apply, and you have to start your funding in that year. It's not flexible to start like 2-3 years later. So how can you deal with planning it at the start of the PhD, that there will be money in 2 years to go a year abroad? It's a practical issue, but I think it's an important point.
What occurs to me, there was some wisdom in the way UFMG has conceived its print steering committee, because each one of the beneficiaries of print in Brazil, they must nominate a group of people, and in our case, there are 6 people. Professor Saliba is one of them. So the way we have designed, Professor Grant is one of us as well. So there's 6 people, exactly. The 6 people steering committee, they are responsible for running the show. And by placing Professor Saliba, who's running the international office, by granting him a seat, we are in a way assuring that there will be some continuity between these strategies delivered by print or thought by print and what the international office will be actually be putting into practice. So what occurs to me, your question is a bit more complex, but on our end, we have thought of ways to try to alleviate, or at least to mitigate some sources of discontinuity and of inconsistency. That's what occurs to me. I don't know if you have better responses to this. No, I think it's an interesting question.
That's very, in a way, coming back to your provocation, right? It's perfect. I think the point is well taken. Because let's suppose, I'm not really sure they're able to answer this better, but let's suppose all the money for print arrives tomorrow. We get this tomorrow. How fast can we actually implement the actions, So somehow, please don't take me wrong, but somehow it's similar to, in that sense, Science Without Borders. It's not the same thing, please don't take it that way. But I mean that there should be some time for planning, and then you start the clock, in that sense, right? So that should be the best way. But that's a very good point. Of course, I believe if you check the university community, right, the PhD community, I believe there may be those who are ready at this point. Let's suppose if you get the grant now, they're able to actually take off and go. But I'm not sure exactly the real scenario. I don't know. Maybe Professor. So
share the same. Institutional design is our best insurance.
So there'll be some lag, some time there.
Well, we would like once again to thank you for coming. Thank you for coming to FMG, and thank you for coming to this meeting. I hope we can strengthen our relations. We wish you a great end of the week here in Belo Horizonte, and then a safe return back home. Thank you very much.
Eu acho que